guys, and welcome to another session of the Quarantine Youth Group, where this is session number 7, and I cannot believe it has been 7 straight Wednesdays where we've been teaching on the Quarantine Youth Group, teaching on YouTube. And if you're anything like me, maybe you're feeling the same way I'm feeling, but I'm tired of it. I started out with a whole lot of motivation. You know, this will be all right for a couple weeks. We'll get it. It'll be good. But now, week 7, I am just like, please, I cannot keep doing this. This has to end. Please, please, please. I miss you guys. I'm honestly struggling with a little bit of technology fatigue. Actually, I saw an email today. Zoom fatigue is apparently now a word now. So I feel like I'm struggling with technology fatigue, Zoom fatigue. I'm tired of looking at a computer. I'm tired of talking to people through a computer. I'm glad we have this, but I want to see people. I want to teach in person. I want to be there with you, not doing this on a computer on a screen. I'm sure you probably feel the same way, and if you don't, at least tell me that you feel the same way, so that way we're in this together, right? So session 7, we are continuing through our Recalculating series, and tonight we are going to be talking about Job. So we've talked about Abraham, we've talked about Joseph, and then tonight we're going to talk about Job. And remember, here's what we're talking about through this series, that God is in the business and has been for a long time of changing people's lives up. I think we're going to go one way, and then God kind of recalculates your life and is sending you on a different path. And collectively, we're all kind of feeling that right now, that we were all going in one direction and one path, and God's kind of shifted things quite a bit for us. And there's been some recalculations that have taken place. And so what can we learn from how God has done this throughout the scripture, throughout time, of when he has recalculated people's lives? And so tonight we're going to be going through the book of Job, looking at how Job responded whenever God dramatically changed his life, whenever God dramatically changed what he was going through. So with that, let's get into Job.
So I remember when I was growing up, both childhood and teen years, one of my least favorite phrases in the world was, "You'll understand when you're older." And you've probably heard that phrase before. Maybe you're like me and you hate it because it just feels like it's a cop-out. Like, how do you argue with someone saying you're not old enough to understand? You can't keep the discussion going. It just ends it flat. And honestly, that's why your parents or your teachers say it to you, because you can't argue with it, because it just ends the conversation. You're just not old enough to understand this yet. Once you get older, you will understand. I hated that phrase growing up. If you've heard it too, I'm going to guess you're like me and you also hated it. But it turns out that that's actually kind of true, and now I actually use that same phrase, okay? Because there really are some things that you just don't understand until you're older. There just really are some things that when you get a larger perspective, when you get a older perspective and you look at it from a different view, you actually finally can understand it. Think of it like when you are a little kid, right? When you're a little kid and you spill your milk or you spill your drink, if you were an apple juice drinker, you cried. You cried because your drink was gone and that was the only milk or the only apple juice in the whole entire world, and you had no idea when you were going to get more. You cried over spilled milk, but once you got older, you realized when you spilled your drink that you could just clean it up and get another glass, and you no longer, hopefully teenagers, you no longer cry over spilling your drink. That as you get older and your perspective changes, then you understand a little bit better. You really don't understand it, so you get older. Right now, as a teenager, your parents are telling you lots of things that what you're doing is a bad idea, and you think no, but they say, hey, you're not really going to understand it until you're older. You don't really understand what the value of $1,000 is until had to work for that $1,000, right? When you're little, $5 in your pocket seems like a ton, but now that you're a teenager, you really need $20 for anything you ever want to do, and then all of a sudden you're going to become an adult, and you're going to have bills to pay, and you're going to think $20, I mean, that's not going to get you anywhere in life. You really do need more than $20 to survive, right? As you get older, your perspective widens, okay? You get a different perspective, and you can understand more. And so now we need to multiply that times infinity as we think about God. That there are some things that we just truly will never be able to understand because from our limited perspective, we just can't have the same viewpoint, the same perspective that God has. And so tonight, as we are continuing through our Recalculating series, we're going to look Job, okay? And this is what Job had to learn, that when God was turning his life upside down, that when God was recalculating his life, Job was looking at things from his perspective, from his viewpoint. But once God got a hold of him, once he realized that, you know what, God has a much bigger perspective, and I can't really understand things until I see things from his perspective, and I'm never actually going to see things from his perspective, so maybe there's just some things I'm just not going to understand. And so here we are. We're going to go through the story of Job. And so Job is a pretty long book. If you've read it before, it's actually kind of a hard book. It's kind of a sad book. A lot of bad things happen to Job and in Job. But we're going to take the 30,000-foot view of it just like we did with Abraham, just like we did with Joseph, because to see God's recalculations, to see how everything changes, we have to see the beginning and we have to see the end. And so I'm just going to kind of walk through the story of Job, and we'll pause at a couple of places to kind of dig deeper in and see what God has to say to us through Job. All right, so here is how Job begins. Job begins where you have God in his throne room, and it says that the elders are there worshiping God, and in comes the adversary, or in comes Satan into the throne room of God. And God says, where have you been? And he says, I've been wandering through, walking through, roaming the world. And God says, have you seen my servant Job? He is blameless. He is righteous. He's a great guy. He worships me. Job's the man. Have you seen Job? And Satan says, well, yeah, of course Job worships you because his life is blessed. He's got lots of money. You have a hedge of protection around him. The only reason he worships you is because of all the good stuff you've put in his life. And God says, bet. I mean, that's really how it all begins, okay? And so God says, I don't think that's the case. I think he worships me. I mean, God could know. Hey, adversary. Hey, Satan, I see his heart. I know these things. But he says, no, he really worships me. And so you, Satan, do what you want. Just you cannot harm him, but he will still worship me. And so the Satan goes to Job, and we see the test one of Job. And it's where basically Satan makes Job's life terrible. And so here's what happens in one day. Okay, so this is one day. This is all in Job chapter 1. Okay, and so here's all the things that happen. A servant comes, and all Job's ox and donkeys were stolen, and every servant that worked with them was killed except for the one who escaped to tell him. And then as soon as that finished, another servant came, said, hey, all of your sheep and servants were killed in a fire except for me who escaped to come and tell you this. As soon as that happened, another servant came, said, hey, all your camels were stolen, and all those who worked with the camels, all those servants were killed except for me who escaped to come tell you this. And then right after all of that, a fourth person came and said, Job, all of your children were having a dinner together, and the house collapsed, and all of your children have died. All of that happened to Job right there at one point, at one moment. A terrible, terrible day for Job. But here's how Job responds. This is Job chapter 1, verses 20 through 22. Then Job stood up, tore his robe, and shaved his head. He fell to the ground and worshipped, saying, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will leave this life. The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." And throughout all this, Job did not sin or blame God for anything. I'm not sure, honesty moment, okay? I'm not sure if I would have responded that way, but we look, says, "Blessed be the name of the Lord." Then we move into Job chapter 2. We almost see a repeat of that same situation that just happened in Job chapter 1, where Satan again comes into God's throne room, and God says, "Hey, did you see what happened there? Did you see what Job did? He still worshiped me. I told you that's what was going to happen." Job says, "Well, yeah, he still worshiped you because he's still healthy. But if you take away a guy's health, then he'll never worship you." And God says, "Bet, that's not what's going to happen." And so God again says, "Okay, Satan, you can do what you want, but you are not allowed to take his life." And Satan goes back to Job, and basically it says he has boils, makes him sick. He has boils all over his skin to where he is basically just sitting in ashes, scraping boils and wounds and disgusting, festering things on his skin off of himself. And here's how he responds. This is his wife actually gets involved at this point. And this is Job chapter 2, verse 9. And his wife said to him, "Are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die." But verse 10, "You speak as a foolish woman speaks," he told her. "Should we accept only good from God and not adversity?" And throughout all of this, Job did not sin in what he said. Job did not sin in what he said. That Job, in the midst of his life going from amazing, awesome, great, to about as terrible as you can imagine your life, all of your children dying, a rich man to a poor man, a healthy man to a sick man, basically just hoping and waiting that he will die soon so the pain will end. But yet in the midst of it, he says, "Listen, God gave us good. God's giving us bad. We don't get to choose what God gives us, but I'm still going to worship God no matter my circumstances." But I want you to notice, okay, that Job isn't sugarcoating what has happened to his life, but Job is in mourning when all this takes place. That just because he is worshiping God in the midst of it, he is still hurt, he is still broken, he is still mourning in ashes. And we're about to see he's very confused about why this is happening, which I think a lot of us right now in this situation can find ourselves as well. God, why is this happening? Perhaps that you've had a family member get sick, or maybe you know someone, a family member or a close friend who has died in the past couple of months, and it's God, why is all of this happening? There's confusion, there's hurt, there's just this question bouncing around in our heads of why. Why? And it's not something that's unique to this time. There's been a whole lot of times throughout history people have been asking why, but I think right now we're all going through it. Why? Why is this happening? And then we kind of catch ourselves in a cycle of where we're asking why, but then we feel bad about ourselves for then asking that question, and so then we feel bad for what's happening and then bad for how we're responding. But I think Job can speak to us a little bit in that. So here's the book of Job actually kind of shifts a little bit right here, where it moves from this narrative to this poetic prose that we're about to see from Job chapter 3 all the way to almost the end of the book, where Job is going to have this conversation with three of his friends, and it follows the same pattern. Job speaks, then a friend speaks, and Job speaks, then a friend speaks, and Job speaks, then a friend speaks. And this happens until Job speaks to all of his friends twice. So Job speaks to each of the three friends twice, and we kind of get to follow along with the discussion that they're having, and it kind of follows the same outline, that it revolves around justice, righteousness, and they like to insult each other a lot. Okay, but those are kind of the three key things that you see running throughout these conversation where Job is saying, hey, I didn't sin. I didn't do anything wrong. I don't know why this is happening to me. God must, if I could prove myself, if I could defend myself to God, then I could show. This is actually what he says. He says this in Job chapter 31, verse 35. He says, if only I had someone to hear my case. Here is my signature. Let the Almighty answer me. Let my opponent compose his indictment. I would surely carry it on my shoulder and wear it like a crown. I would give him an account of all my steps. I would approach him like a prince. Where Job is saying, if I could get my day in court with God, if I could get my day in court with God, then I could show to him that I don't deserve this, that I could show to him that this is not just, this is not justice, this is not fair, this is not what I deserve. If I could get my day in court, then I could prove that to God. And then his friends are saying the opposite. And so all this is the very standard way of thinking back then, which is if something bad happens to you, if God is bringing bad things into your life, then that means you did something bad. And so Job's friends are like, Job, you're being too proud. You don't know what you're talking about. Obviously, you sinned because nothing this bad would ever happen to anybody unless they sinned. The only way something this bad could happen to anybody was if they sinned, or maybe you didn't sin, but it was your children sinned, but there was some sin that has happened. Maybe you don't even know about it, Job, but there's no way this happens unless you sinned. And what Job's saying, look, this is not justice. His friends are saying, oh no, this is definitely justice because God would never be wrong. And so for this to have happened, you must have done something bad. But we know from the beginning of the book that that's not what happened, that this was not punishment for Job sinning. In fact, God said at the beginning, Job is a righteous man. He is a faithful man. But that this was trials that were coming into Job's life. Was Job going to worship God when things were good? And was Job going to worship God when things were bad? And Job still worshiped, but yet he is still struggling of why is this happening? Why, God? Why would you do this to me? This is not fair. And I think we're kind of drawn to Job right now. A lot of us are drawn to Job right now. I'm kind of drawn to Job right now because I'm asking that same question of, God, why is this happening in the world? God, why is this happening? It doesn't seem fair. And it's the same question Job is asking. But here's where I'm hoping that maybe we can get out of this cycle of feeling bad a little bit, because we ask this question, why, and then we start to feel bad, and we're like, no, I'm not supposed to ask why. I must be being unfaithful. I must be not believing. So then we feel bad about ourselves for asking that question, but then we then still feel bad that all this is happening, and we don't know why, and we can't help ourselves from asking why, and so we're just stuck in this circle of feeling bad because of what's happening, and then feeling bad because we feel bad and we just can't get out of it. And so let me maybe speak into this a little bit, that it is okay to ask the question. It is okay to ask God why. Now that's what Job is doing throughout this whole book. God, why? God is to handle our questions, that God is big enough to answer us, that God is loving enough, strong enough, there for us, wants us there enough that we can ask these questions to him and not feel guilty because we are asking God a question. The problem we get into is when we have this question in our head, and instead of taking it to God, we run away to somewhere else. That sometimes we say, why God, then we become angry at God, and then instead of bringing it to God, we run from God. But instead, we have to do what Job did, which is bring the question, bring the anger, bring the confusion, and not hide it and run from God, but bring it to God's feet and say, God, this is how I'm feeling. Please speak to me in this. Please answer me in this, to where it draws us to him rather than pushing us away from him. Because the truth is, God knows how you're feeling. God knows what you're already thinking. And so to take what you're thinking, but then to act like it's not there, to try to hide it from God, it doesn't do anything. It hurts us. It's not like we're hiding it from God. It's not like he doesn't already know. So instead, as you're feeling these questions, these struggles, these problems, as you're asking why, as you're angry, as you're confused, as all this is going on, don't take it and run from God, but take it and run to God, because he will be there for you. So after Job has these conversations with these three friends, a fourth friend actually shows up. And this fourth friend kind of shows up out of nowhere, says, hey, look, all y'all are kind of messing up here, okay? That you do not have the mind of God. You don't know God well enough. You don't see from God's perspective, that this is not an either-or situation, that it does not have to be Job's sin. It does not have to be that God is wrong, that y'all are kind of missing the point here, thinking your perspective is the best perspective. And Job doesn't get a chance to respond, because after this friend speaks, then God speaks, okay? And so this is what God says in Job chapter 38, all right? So this is Job chapter 38, and I'm going to read verses 1 through 7. So it says, then the Lord answered Job from the whirlwind. He said, who is this who obscures my counsel with ignorant words? Get ready to answer me like a man. I love that line. Get ready to answer me like a man when I question you. You will inform me. Where were you when I established the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who fixed its dimensions? Certainly you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? What supports its foundations, or who laid its cornerstone, while the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? And God continues speaking this to Job, saying, Job, where were you when I did all of this? You do not know what it is to be God. You do not know what it is to have the perspective of God, to be the one who sets the stars in place, to be the one who makes the sun rise, to be the one who makes the sun set, to be the one who puts the stars where they go, the expanse of the galaxy underneath the sea, that I, God, am in charge and in control of all of this at once. And you, Job, are one person, and so you cannot understand what that is, and that you cannot question my justice. And he goes through this, and then again, Job chapter 40, this is God speaking again. The Lord answered Job, will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who argues with God give an answer. And then Job answered, I am insignificant. How can I answer you? I have placed my hand over my mouth. I have spoken once, and I will not reply. Twice, but I can add nothing. And then the Lord answered Job from the whirlwind, get ready to answer me like a man. When I question you, you will inform me. Would you really challenge my justice? See, he saw the heart of Job. He says, will you really challenge my justice? Would you declare me guilty to justify yourself? Do you have an arm like God's? Can you thunder with a voice like his? So you can see there from what God said that here's where Job crossed the line, okay? And this is where we can cross the line too. When Job crossed the line from asking questions of God to him stepping over and accusing God. That Job switched from, God, help me understand this, I don't know what's going on, to Job saying, God, you messed up here. And if you hadn't messed up, then I wouldn't be in this situation, but this isn't justice. You messed up, God. Let me show you. And God is saying, no. You don't tell me what is justice. You don't tell me what is what. Where were you? Where were you, Job? And here's what's great about Job, okay, is that he gets it. Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do anything, and no plan of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this who conceals my counsel with ignorance? Surely I spoke about things I did not understand, things too wondrous for me to know. You said, listen now, and I will speak. When I question you, you will inform me. I had heard reports about you, but now my eyes have seen you. Verse 6, therefore I reject my words and am sorry for them. I am dust and ashes. And then God then declares that Job spoke rightly about God when he said this. That Job spoke rightly when he understood, okay, God, you are doing things that I don't understand, and maybe I don't have to understand them, but God, I trust you. That God, I brought this to you and you have answered me, and I'm so grateful that God speaks to us in our hurt, that God speaks to us in our anger, and I take those words back. God, I am sorry. I should never have accused you. I don't know what I'm saying. I don't see the bigger picture here. And so here's what we can learn here in this moment from Job. Because right now, for a lot of us and for a lot of you, it might feel like the world is falling apart, that the world is caving in. I mean, coronavirus is going on. That's old news at this point, right? And now the murder hornets are coming in. It's just everything is falling apart. The world is caving in. What in the world is going on? And the question just pops in. God, what are you doing? God, why? God, are you sure? Are you sure you're in control? Are you sure you know what you're doing? Are you sure this is how it's supposed to be? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? God, come on. And those thoughts pop in, and we can do one of two things with them. We can take that and we can hide it in shame, and we can run away and hide that from God and try to hide ourselves from God, and then that pulls us away from God. Or we can take those questions and say, God, this is how I'm feeling right now. God, this is the lies that are being spoken to me. God, this is what I'm not understanding. Help me to understand. And here's the kicker, though. God never reveals to Job here, this is why this happened. He doesn't reveal it to him. But instead, Job just has to say, God, I trust you. I don't understand. My faith in you is bigger than my faith in myself. My faith in you is bigger than my need to know everything. God, I trust that one as big, as powerful, and as loving as you, I trust you. And so I'm bringing this to you. And the answer that God brings to him is, I'm here for you and I've got this. And so right now, if you're in the midst of confusion, if you're in the midst of hurt, God hears you. He understands you. He's there for you. And God's got this.
Thanks again for being here for another session of the Quarantine Youth Group. God has this. And so no matter what we're feeling, no matter how much it hurts, no matter how much confusion we have, let's bring that to God this week. Don't hide it from him. Bring it to him. I miss you guys. I hope that we get to see you soon. I've got one question that I would love for you to answer in the description. Just one thing, answer it in the comments. Let's get a little bit of back and forth going here. If you missed our Zoom game night this week, make sure that you are there next Wednesday as we just kind of hang out and have fun together playing some silly games on Zoom. It's a great time. But for now, wash your hands, stay safe, and